Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Taking Care of Business. I'm Ronan Berry, this is Midlands 103, and coming up over the next hour, today some new EU e-evidence rules came into force and Irish businesses could have just 8 hours to respond to demands for customer data. Maureen King of iTrust 6A will join me later to explain what businesses need to know, what the implications are and what it means in practical terms for businesses and why it has been brought in as of today as well. Also, a key thing, if you are in business and costs have been rising steadily over the past number of years and there seems to be no end and little sort of sign of it abating in any way, and if you are thinking of investing in your business, before you invest, are you able to do more with what you already have in place? Well, later in the show we're going to get a fascinating insight into the lean journey that an Offaly based company has undertaken over the last couple of years, because Kevin Brady, the Chief Operating Officer with Applied Concepts in Birr, will join me to talk about how lean has transformed their Birr operations and indeed really just overturned some of the old habits that were into place and really unlocked massive potential within staff, within processes, within supply lines, and they have learned a huge amount from it, so much so that they're now looking at re-educating other businesses out there through their lean tours. So Kevin will take us through the business, where they were, where they are now, where they think they're going, and how lean has really helped that transformation. He'll also talk about how you can get involved in those lean tours. So if you are a business owner in any sector and you are wondering whether lean management applies to your business, tune in a little bit later or stay tuned, because you'll definitely have your eyes and ears opened. I can guarantee that as well. If you want to be part of this evening's conversation on the show, you'll get me here by text or WhatsApp in the studio on 083 3010 103. That, of course, is powered by the home of Offaly's top-selling car brand, Lamb Brothers Toyota, on the Arden Road in Tullamore. But the evenings are a little bit darker. There's actually a bit of rain out there this evening. Not suggesting the summer is over just yet, but for many of you listening, your kids or grandkids will be heading back to school next week. So, and even in business circles, you get that little sense from people that they're nearly looking forward to the end of next week or early September, because there's almost like a little bit of a reset and we go back to normal and people are back. Kids are in school, they're going to maybe creches or whatever else, and the normal routine kicks back in. And as we approach September then, our minds get cast maybe towards things like Budget 2027. Because although Ireland's public finances may look strong, how secure are they if so much corporation tax is coming from just a small group of companies? The Irish SME Association, or ISME, says Budget 2027 must be a turning point, shifting more attention towards indigenous firms and giving Irish-owned businesses a better chance to scale, invest and compete. Neil McDonnell is Chief Executive ISME, and Neil joins me now. Very good evening, Neil. I suppose to begin, we've built an extraordinarily successful economy on a dangerously narrow foundation, seems to be some of the kind of key points of a recent press release and this pre-budget submission from ISME. How exposed are we, though, if those corporation tax receipts were to suddenly turn?
Well, good evening, Ronan. It's obviously, you guys in the media are covering the stuff, the material coming out of IFAC, the central bank, the ESRI and others on the sort of bounty that we're getting at the moment from corporation tax, and it is very, very significant. But just to kind of put this in context, 20 years ago, before the Celtic Tiger crashed, economists and others recognised that a lot of the exchequer income was coming from one particular sector, and that was stamp duty on an inflated property market. Now, but even so, 20 years ago, the tax components, where the state was getting the money from, was less concentrated than it is today, believe it or not. So in 2006, VAT, corporation tax and income tax together made up 73% of the money we had to spend in the budget. Today, those three tax heads make up 90%, and that's because of the growth in corporation tax and income tax. And the other thing we're drawing attention to is obviously there is a risk around corporation tax, but the other bit lurking below the surface there that people don't realise is that as the income tax take has grown, we've ended up in a situation now, and people see this as a good thing. We have a highly progressive tax system, one of the most progressive tax systems in the world. But what that has resulted in as we've moved into 2026 and we're looking at what sort of budget we're going to put together for next year, 86% of the income tax revenue that the state takes in comes from the 8th, 9th and 10th deciles, the top third of taxpayers. And that really kicks in at about €85,000. So about 86% of income tax is been paid by people who make more than €80,000. And unfortunately, it's in the nature of employment in small businesses that make up the vast majority of firms. Unfortunately, those higher earners tend to be concentrated in the multinational firms. So people don't realise that we actually have a double exposure to these big multinationals. It's not just on corporation tax, it's on those high earners. And if anything was to happen that reduced the attractiveness to those multinational companies of staying here and continuing employment here, then our tax base wouldn't just be threatened on corporation tax, it would be threatened on corporation tax and income tax. So I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but it's just to put our pre-budget in context and what we're looking for.
Because back before the last crash, there was a lot of people, and you said that yourself, issuing warnings around an overheated property sector. I think at the time construction was something like 27-28% of GDP, which in a normal economy it should be down around 10 or 12%. There were signs there. You can argue till the cows come home whether people listened. Are people listening when it comes to making an argument regarding corporation tax and that dependence on corporation and income tax at that level?
I think people are aware of the corporation tax issue. The figures prepared by IFAC and the central bank don't suggest that we're looking at a cliff edge on that, because despite the policies of the Trump administration, there hasn't been a major effort to onshore those American companies back to the United States. Certainly not yet. I don't think there is a similar awareness of the problem on the income tax side. And we just want people to recognise that. We're not saying there's an imminent threat that loads of these high earners are going to be made redundant. But what you have seen is not a threat from the Trump administration, but you have seen recently the loss of a lot of high-tech jobs due to the progress of artificial intelligence. That has attacked the earning capacity, not of lower income earners, but actually of higher income earners in more technical professions. So what we're just saying is, look, we are in a position where our tax base has become very concentrated. We know from 20 years ago that that's a big risk, and we're asking the government to de-risk that. It is possible to de-risk that.
Well, your pre-budget submission, you're calling for more support, and you said it needs to, budget 2027 should be a turning point for indigenous businesses. What does that look like? What are your key demands, and why now? And what difference do you think could those actions actually have when it comes to small business? Because what are the key challenges they're facing, and how do you plan to get businesses support from the budget?
Well, in a single word, what are we looking for in budget 2027? It's assistance from the government to scale up Irish businesses. 99.8% of businesses are small or medium, and we really now those stats aren't a million miles away from in other countries in Europe. The issue in those other countries is that those multinationals or those big firms in other countries don't contribute as much to the economy as they do here. So what we're trying to do is, identify that cohort of businesses that can scale up. And where does the real magic happen? The ESRI and Enterprise Ireland have shown that once a firm gets over 50 employees, that's when the magic starts to happen. That's when specialisation happens. And once firms get over 50 employees, they typically become more innovative, and they typically export more, and they typically file more patent applications. They have and they have higher levels of productivity. So to get small Irish businesses to scale up and get over that 50 threshold, we need to stop the tax measures that penalise SMEs more than big business. So, for example, there's a thing that a lot of your listeners would not have heard of called a closed company surcharge. And that stops small businesses keeping retained earnings on the balance sheet, effectively savings. The taxman treats those as tax evasion and applies a 15 or a 20% surcharge to retained earnings that aren't taken as income by the business owners within a fixed period of time. I mean, that is an anti-scale provision, and we need to get rid of really stupid measures like that they belong in the last century. They're not going to form part of a progressive Ireland in the future.
As well as maybe looking at overhauling then the tax system to do that, the current setup, you mentioned Enterprise Ireland, the local enterprise offices obviously play a key role in any business development, and about 2 years ago their brief was widened to include firms up to 50. Is that meeting the needs at present, do you think? Was enough done? And is that encouraging business to actively try to scale then?
Feedback on that is very mixed, Ronan. So historically, the Leos had the brief for micro businesses, that's less than 10 people, and startups. The needs of small business, that's those businesses with between 10 and 50 employees, are different. And typically, they have, they're asking much more searching questions about treasury, about export, and so on. And the feedback has not been uniformly positive about that move. And from the Leos themselves, we understand, to be fair to them, that they haven't been resourced to look after small businesses, the 10 to 50s, on top of their historical brief of the micro businesses, those employing less than 10. So we would say we need to do more to scale up our small businesses than just say that the Leos are looking after those 10 to 50 employee businesses. We need to go further than that.
You're also highlighting things like access to capital and also falling SME credit in certain areas, including construction, retail and hospitality. Kind of quite concerning again if you are a business or somebody who is hoping to scale a business.
Absolutely. And, given the amount of construction going on in the economy now between infrastructure, energy, water, wastewater and housing, to see the balance sheets of, and we can see this in the levels of outstanding debt from central bank figures, to see small construction companies contracting still is, even post-pandemic, is actually quite frightening, and it says there's something systemically wrong. We know, everyone knows that, Ireland relying on 2.1 banks isn't healthy. With the best will in the world, those banks are not being incentivized to get out there lending to small business. And they simply aren't. So I know the banks will say, well, there isn't the demand there from SMEs, but the problem is that the lending criteria and so on are so strict that a lot of small businesses just won't devote a lot of time to even attempting to apply for debt finance these days. It's very time consuming, it's very onerous, takes too long, and the coupon that's going to be put on that debt is very high by comparison with what small businesses would pay in continental Europe.
You're also calling for SkillNet Ireland's funding to be increased. It fell from €63 million last year to €54.2 million in 2026. You want to see that brought up to at least €100 million in budget 2027. Will that go far enough? And I guess what role does the National Training Fund play here? Because we have $1 billion or $2 billion squirreled away there that nobody seems to be able to get access to.
I mean, Ronan, that unfortunately is one of the great scandals at the moment. A lot of your listeners out there who are employers don't realise that 1% of the employers' PRSI, 1% out of the 11% that they're paying is going into the National Training Fund. That means that every year employers are putting in about €1.2 billion into the training fund, and that training fund now has a surplus. There's just $2 billion sitting in a separate bank account. This is not state money. This belongs to employers and the National Training Fund, and it's meant to be spent on employees in the workplace or people about to enter the workplace. And all that employers see out of that is 53 million coming into SkillNet. It was meant to have been 100 million by last year, by 2025, and somehow that plan seems to have fallen down the back of the sofa. We need to see that get up to 100 million really quickly, and ideally it should be far greater. There is enormous demand in the workplace for training and upskilling now.
Yeah, one just thinks if that can be unlocked, even if it's for AI training or whatever else it is, in terms of helping smaller businesses scale, like there's definitely a little roadmap there that we can help many businesses from that. Neil, it's a pleasure. You're talking to me in the Midlands area. It's quite likely or possible the Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Tourism and Employment could be listening this evening as well. If you had a magic wand and you got 3 asks from Budget 2027, what would they be for small businesses?
3 asks, end the closed company surcharge. It's ridiculous. Really fast one for small exporters that will cost the state literally nothing is change, sorry to be technical, the revenue section 56 threshold for exporting companies from 75% of sales down to 50% of sales. That would really stimulate exports and reduce. Here's one that we reckon the state is going to make at least $500 million in extra tax from. Reduce the stupid capital gains tax of 33% down to we recommend 2 rates: a standard rate of 25% and an intellectual property rate of 20%. So do those 3 things, and that would be make real rapid and very cheap progress for small businesses.
Well, there you go. You've written it on slate. Let's see what Budget 2027 brings. As always, Neil McDonnell, Chief Executive ISME, thank you so much for that this evening.
Thanks, Ron.
And there you go. If you're a small business owner, I'm sure much of that resonates with you as well. Would those 3 asks, would they make a huge difference to your business? Let me know. 083 30 10 103. I'm going to take a quick break. After that, though, I'm going to speak about a new thing that was brought into force today. It's called the EU e-evidence rules. And they could actually have some implications or could apply to your business. Find out just what and how in a couple of moments. A major change in the way police and judicial authorities across Europe can obtain digital evidence took effect today, and Ireland could find itself right at the very centre of it. Under the EU's new e-evidence rules, authorities investigating crimes in one EU country will be able to issue legally binding orders directly to certain service providers in another country for electronic evidence. That could potentially include account information, emails, messages and other digital data. Ireland might be particularly exposed because of the scale of the tech sector here, and the Department of Justice estimates that up to 600 service providers could designate an addressee in Ireland, with more than 300,000 production orders potentially coming to providers based here every year. So what does that mean in practice for us as citizens, for us as business people? Well, Maureen King is founder and CEO of Irish legal tech company iTrust 6A and spent more than 20 years working in telecommunications and lawful access to data. Maureen, you're very welcome to Taking Care of Business. And I suppose before we get into the business implications, what's the actual problem Europe is trying to solve here?
Hi, Ronan. Good evening to you. Well, I think what we should do is probably give some context to that problem, right? And if you consider at a European level, what we're trying to achieve here is effective mechanisms for judicial cooperation and cross-border access to electronic evidence. Historically, that has been managed through what's referred to as mutual legal assistance treaties. So they're essentially agreements between one member state and another as to how they would go about lawfully accessing information and getting that information to the relevant authorities. So in simple terms, what this is about is helping law enforcement to quickly access electronic evidence across borders.
Because I was looking at some of the rationale behind it from the EU, that they believe that electronic evidence is relevant in an estimated 85% of criminal investigations and 65% of cases involving e-evidence to providers in other jurisdictions. So we can see how obviously tech and the growth of the tech sector and the kind of digital eyes we leave is clearly impacting this, and this is a response from the EU to that then.
Sure, and I think what we need to remember here is that this is essential to combating crime. So you talked about there about all the different entities that are involved in accessing electronic evidence. So whether that's the start of an investigation that starts with a crime that is either suspected or needs to be prevented or prosecuted, and then that particular crime then is handed over to law enforcement. So if we take in a practical example where, say in the case of maybe a child that goes missing sadly, and the German police are investigating that. So that child goes missing in Germany, and you can imagine the length of time that is necessary to actually investigate that type of a crime. So urgency and critical and timely and lawful access to information is hugely important. However, when that child goes missing, that police officer then needs to get some access to that information, and that information could be stored with an Irish cloud provider, for example, or a social media platform or a telecommunications provider. So, for example, you referenced some of the type of data. There's 4 categories of data that are prescribed under the regulation. So that's the likes of subscriber data, data to ID a user, traffic data, and content data. So that would be extremely helpful, particularly in the case of a missing child, for location data, for example, or user data that might identify the user of a phone, like phone records and somebody's email details. So it's broad and it's wide. However, it's quite prescriptive within the regulation, the subcategories of data that are under those 4 categories, Ronan.
And even if we take it down though, like, so, I mean, something as of the extreme and horrific as maybe a child going missing, if it's down to just good old-fashioned organised crime, or maybe there's a bit of drug trafficking going on and your business has been used, maybe completely unknowns to you then, for a purchase or for something, could your business be also open to a request like this where maybe somebody is actually seeking data? It mightn't be an emergency, but can that request be made by overseas jurisdictions?
Yes. So what it has actually done is it's brought into play what's called EPOCs, so a European production order, which generally requires a response for standard orders within 10 days. The emergency ones are 8 hours to respond. So in the case of organised crime, that falls into the category of serious crime. So the type of data that is relevant in those types of investigations is quite prescribed within the categories of data that are within the regulation.
And I guess I got a press release on this yesterday, and I found that this is quite interesting, and I wanted to follow up on it too. Would there be a sense with people out there going, how can we tell then if a request is actually genuine or just another potential spam attempt? You know, could spammers potentially try to use this now to try and hit businesses and see if they will send them information, or how could people be ready for that, or how are they protected from that?
So I think what's important is, and which again is prescribed under the regulation, you need to what's referred to as designate an addressee. So simply that means if you're a business, if you're an Irish business and you're providing services in the EU, whether you're headquartered here or not is irrelevant, then what you need to do is register as an addressee. So that simply means your name, your email, and there's other criteria and details that you need to designate here. And you can get a lot of help from the government's website in relation to the Irish Government e-Evidence portal, how service providers can register. And there's a lot of frequently asked questions within that are hugely helpful to Irish businesses to guide them as to registering as an addressee, what the necessary criteria is. And then when they get that, then they've advised themselves that this is who can verify the requests that are coming in, and that's hugely important, because the other thing to remember is that these requests are going through oversight. It is a judicial authority that is authorising the request. And why that's important is because we have a number of different rights that are at play here, and they need to be balanced. So the whole principle of legality, necessity and proportionality needs to be considered when those requests are being submitted. So in other words, back to our German police officer, when the German police officer is applying for and making an application to the judge, that case will need to be brought forward. That judge will need to authorise or not the access to that electronic evidence that gets served on the provider wherever they are based in the EU.
So obviously the actual relevant definition of a service provider will be really important there. What are we likely to see next? This has come into force today. What happens now, say, locally in Ireland to make businesses or people who might be affected aware of this and I suppose give the businesses the education they need around this change in law?
I think what's important, Ronan, is, and again, I'm going to guide people through the government's website, because without getting too legalistic about it, under Article 2, the regulation applies to service providers offering services in the EU. The scope is much broader than what you might think, and there are so many different types of service providers that are storing or hosting or processing or transmitting data that may be required to preserve or produce it. So they could be cloud providers, website hosting companies, email providers, social media, domain registration, collaboration tools, marketplaces, gaming, dating apps. It's so broad. So I think the risk is that even for Irish businesses, they may not think that are aware that they are actually in scope. Because to be fair to a lot of the multinationals and large telecommunication service providers, this is a 10-year story. It started over 10 years ago, and it has been discussed and debated again and again over this period of time. So today is day one, enforcement day. And the most important thing and the pressing thing for any Irish business to do is determine whether or not they are in scope. And then they go and they designate and they register their address. And essentially, at a basic practical level, if they can simply document those processes for handling their orders and then prepare for those 10 days, and equally important, those 8-hour response deadlines, because they're 24/7. Now, let's be realistic here. The volume of those type of requests are not going to be coming in the scale at which they will be coming in, what we know from transparency reports from the large multinationals. However, that said, the complexity technically, operationally and legally of handling these type of cross-border requests, even down to the basic thing, what do they look like? You can get access to see what an e-evidence EPOC or preservation order actually looks like, so that you can prevent that risk that you were just speaking about earlier. However, when you do designate, there is a decentralized IT system, which is called eCodex. And Irish businesses can actually get access to that, but they need to designate to register address and their details first before they can actually get that access. So without complicating things, I think what's important is, first step, the next step is go check whether you are in scope. There's a definition for service providers. There's great help up on the service provider registration and the e-government e-evidence portal, and a lot of questions that are answered there, and some support tools and guidance that would be very helpful to Irish businesses.
Maureen King, thank you so much for that, because yes, today is day one, enforcement day, but we really get a sense from you there about the implications of it, and thank you for your advice on that and guidance there for people to go and check that out, and at least make sure that if it is relevant to them, that they know that and they begin to put the proper measures in place. Thanks, Maureen. We'll catch up with you again soon.
Great. Thank you, Ronan. Grateful for the opportunity.
Not at all. That's Maureen King there, the CEO of iTrust 6A. So there you go. It's so much changes, and we see the real impact that digital has on our everyday lives. So if you're a business that might be affected there, definitely check that out or do the background research into it. If you are a business, and Neil McDonnell of ISME spoke a lot about the scaling a business, before you invest, could you actually make more money from what you have in your business already? Well, one local company says the answer to that one is definitely yes, and they're opening their doors to show you how you can do it too. Find out how, who and why just in a few moments. When businesses talk about becoming more productive, the temptation can be to think about investing in new technology, new machinery, or perhaps hiring more people. But what if some of the biggest gains are already sitting within the business, in how people work, how products move through a factory or a workshop, or how everyday problems are solved? Applied Concepts in Birr manufactures blasting equipment and other machinery, and has been on a significant lean journey, developing a culture of continuous improvement and encouraging its own employees to identify better ways of doing things. And they're now opening up their doors to other businesses to see that transformation for themselves through the lean tours that they're now offering. I'm delighted to be joined by Kevin Brady, Chief Operating Officer at Applied Concepts. Kevin, you're very welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Thanks very much, Ronan. Thanks for being on your show.
Not at all. I mean, anybody that follows you on social media or LinkedIn will see the impact that lean is having on your business. I suppose, give us a little introduction to Applied Concepts, what you do, and I think, is it almost 20 years in business at this stage?
Yeah, absolutely. So Mark Glendenning, our CEO, started Applied in 2010 from his kitchen table in Kinnity, and he quickly outgrew that small facility and moved the whole business to Birr in 2018, and we've been there since. I suppose we manufacture sandblasting equipment and all the abrasive for blasting, and in the last 5 years we designed a new product called a PTO compressor, and that kind of fell into the agri market by chance. And yeah.
Now, when you mention agri markets, we're not just talking Birr and the surrounding areas. We're talking how many overseas markets at this stage?
Yeah, we're exporting all over the world, America, Canada, all over Europe, and I don't know how many customers we have.
You're in nearly every corner already, and it's another example of great Irish manufacturing companies that start off local but then get this kind of global footprint on it. So clearly things had been going quite well. At what point then did you decide, or did you discover that we can do things even better?
Yeah, so I'd say I joined Applied in 2020, just after COVID-19, and I joined as head of production and design. I would have had 15 years experience as a design engineer, so I was confident I could improve the products through better design. What I had very little experience in was managing production and, more importantly, managing people. So let's say I've been on a steep learning curve since 2020. Before joining Applied, I was actually Googling what are the roles and what are the KPIs of a production manager, and that's where I discovered 2 Second Lean by a guy in America called Paul Akers. I was watching his YouTube channel. I became completely hooked, and everything looked incredible. The factory was unbelievably clean, had hundreds of different products flowing to customers, and that was kind of my vision for Applied. But honestly, I thought it looked a bit too good to be true. It was a bit.
So you go into Mark Glendenning and the team and you go, lads, I have the future, I have a solution. How was it received when you first pitched it to them? Did it go, that's some American you know what, and it's never going to work in Birr?
Yeah, not well. I wouldn't say it was taken on straight away, but Mark is a great guy. Took him a while to crack him, but he, I suppose, at that time, we were trying to, we had new products. I suppose we were like a lot of business owners. We were running around with our hair on fire. The phone was hopping. Quality was good, but the culture was poor. There was a lot of things going wrong. And we were there late every evening. We were burnt out.
And is that, can you add to that stuff like responding kind of to customer demands, forgetting orders? Is it all those things that I'd say many people listening are going, that's unfortunately us every day. We're constantly firefighting. And so it takes a lot to get to that point where you go, we can change it. But then to start changing, where do you start? Because obviously you go too deep, it's going to be resisted. If you go too shallow, no one's going to believe in it.
Yeah, so I was pushing this thing to Mark about this Paul Akers guy, this American guy, and I didn't really understand much of it myself. I'd known nothing about lean, and but then I came across another guy called Ryan Tierney from Northern Ireland, Limavady in Derry, and I went on a lean tour of his factory, and when I came back, it was like I had a mind transplant when I went there. It completely changed how I understood what lean actually was. And when I came back, I was determined that what I seen there was going to change everything. And it was very simple. Nothing I seen there was outrageously difficult or everything was achievable. So that's where I kind of started, and we started with a morning meeting. Very simple. Gathered everyone around into a little room and told everyone we were going to do this. We started weekly first for a few weeks, and then we brought on to a daily morning meeting. And like I was standing up in front of 10 lads in boiler suits telling we're going to talk about our problems every morning. And you can imagine the pushback.
Yeah.
These guys were great workers. All they want to do was weld stuff, weld up pallets of stuff. And here's me not in the place too long, and I'm trying to tell these guys there's a better way, there's an easier way.
And is that a key thing, though? You mentioned welding pallets and stuff, and that's the system they were brought into. But is that maybe a hint as to where things can go wrong when there's no lean management, that maybe we're making components or pieces that actually we don't have an order for, so therefore they're just going into excess stock and they could sit on a shelf for many years or maybe even get misplaced eventually?
Totally. Like there's the 8 wastes of lean. You probably heard of Tim Wood or downtime, and that was one of the things, was overproduction was the mother of all wastes. We were overproducing stuff, then we were storing it, because we were storing it so long it was getting defected, and then we were skipping it. You know, it was because we were cutting one thing, we said sure we'll cut 20 of them, and all our cash flow was going into, you know, all that steel. It was just one thing was leading to the next, and it was just almost impossible. And it's a journey we've been on. For 2 years we couldn't see it ourselves, even though we were on a lean journey. Compared to today, we only cut now what we actually sell. We don't overproduce anything now.
Yeah, but you've made so many changes too, and I've seen this online with you, and had the pleasure of being on one of the tours there last year. Yeah. Even the way you adopted workstations for people welding, and you took the heavy lifting and you took the forklift out of what's quite heavy duty work. Like, there was a lot of ingenuity went into this. So I suppose you had the benefit of coming from a fabrication background.
Yeah.
But you've really made it a shining example. But those little changes, like in terms of even numbers or the difference it makes to like a person's work day, just give us examples of that. Like, because if you take something where a person has to like maybe manually handle it or get lifting equipment to move something, and you put it in a way that they can actually just move it on almost on a spindle and get the job done, surely they can make more then in a day.
Absolutely. I'd say 90% of everything we do, I'd say 90% of everything you do, Ron, is waste. Believe it, I'm not. But everything we do, 90% of it is waste. So when you're thinking of you're making something, it's all that motion involved in walking, looking for a tool, you know, searching for information, waiting for a product or whatever it is. It's only when the product is changing is when you're adding value to the customer. The customer doesn't care. I can't put on an invoice, I had to walk 20 metres to make this product, when I could have brought the product right beside me.
Yeah.
So we've adapted the whole production and place, so there's no motion. Well, there's always motion, there's necessary motion, but then we've brought pallets of goods closer to the assembly areas. We're constantly watching motion and transport and these things. And
probably like defects are probably almost a thing of the past at this point, are they? Like in terms of reducing the number of defects, and you know, a defect that gets out onto a customer site is a big issue for a company. If you can prevent that internally, I'm sure you're seeing huge differences from a QC angle.
Absolutely. Our quality has, I'd say, gone. Our quality was always good, to be fair, but it's just gone to another level. You know, a quick story. I was at a Lean Summit in 2024, and I met these two guys. One guy was Mr. Amamura and Mr. Amazawa. I apologise if I don't get the Japanese pronunciation correct, but I asked these guys are real top guys in Lexus and Toyota, and Japanese gurus of this lean carry on. So I asked them, how do you better your quality? How do you get that quality so good like a Lexus car? And Mr. Amazawa said to me, you have to find treasure in your waste. And I was like, oh, brilliant, thanks so much, but going away thinking, what the hell does that mean? And that's something we really brought into our quality, is we talk about every morning how many days since our last defect has got to the customer. And just a simple thing like talking about it, and when we get a defect, that we have 20 people around giving their opinion on how this is never going to happen again.
Absolutely, and it's getting back to the kind of root cause stuff, as to it's often it's not a person, it's maybe a failure in a process and stuff like that. So I'm sure it's music to ears of many people listening. If you would like to see one of those morning meetings in action, you can join one of the lean tours that Applied are now providing. I'm going to take a quick break, and after that Kevin's going to tell us how you can get involved and exactly what you might learn on one of those tours. Kevin Brady is the Chief Operating Officer with Applied Concepts in Birr, and he's just been talking to us about their lean journey. Even during the break there, I was in the factory about a year ago, and he's told me I wouldn't recognise it if I went back again, that as you continuously look at improving and evolving what you've already achieved, even more savings and a better way of doing it is found, and I'm actually really keen to maybe get in and see it again. But if you want to see lean in action, if you want to see a local company that's embraced it and it can show all the benefits from it, they'll also talk you through the pitfalls and the mistakes that you might make along the way. But a great way to start that is of a tour of their factory, a designated lean tour, where you will join one of those morning meetings that Kevin spoke about. Kevin, you launched these tours in the last year and they're growing in popularity, I believe. Talk to us about, though, you actually bring somebody in and they see lean in action starting at that morning huddle.
Yeah, so if 5 years ago you could say to me, I have a tour for you to show you how I can help you with your inventory, with your cash flow, with your staff turnover, with all these things, I would have jumped at it. I suppose where the lean tour started, I actually went to see Ryan Tierney's lean tour, and I went on another one, Paul Nolan's lean tour in Wexford, and I was talking to Paul Nolan and he said, you should start doing lean tours. I said, I thought this guy was crazy. Who'd want to come and actually see this stuff? But it's crazy, there's such a demand for it. We're booked up now for the rest of the year, I believe.
Wow.
And we've actually took on a continuous improvement manager who manages the tours full time.
That's incredible, yeah. Because I think when people think of lean, they think of Toyota, of massive companies like Airbus. So I think when people know there are examples locally, you can see why the interest is there, because they are learning and it's an eye opener for them. Do you get much feedback from people then? Like, does that start an engagement and you think people are hooked at that point? Because a lot of the staff you mentioned, like the welders and everybody, like a lot of them are there for a long time. They've embraced it as well, so people can clearly see what it's doing. Yeah, like the lean tour is nearly as much for us, it's nearly a process for us as much as the people that come on the tour, because it's a way to keep us sharp. Like we have a saying that we're always tour ready, and when our people see the yellow bibs coming around on tour, it's like I always say, it's like the mother-in-law coming over. You're going to fill the dishwasher, or yeah, so it's very good that way. It keeps us on our toes in one way. It's excellent for the people that come on the tour. I'd always ask them, what's your expectation for today before the tour starts? And usually it's the stuff that you think of when you hear the word lean. You think it's shiny floors, whiteboards, charts, KPIs, that kind of thing, measurement. But you don't really see that. What you really come out of our tour with is a real sense of our culture. And as the tour goes around, it goes to every department, so it'd be fabrication and welding and powder coating and assembly and stores and the office. What you really see is the culture and how everyone is bought in. And everybody can contribute back into it, and all ideas are welcome, because that sounds like the most logical thing to do, but it takes a body of work to get there. I think what you've achieved in 2 years is phenomenal, and you're probably going to go even deeper by the sounds of things. Yeah, like that's the whole thing, the whole Kaizen mindset. It's continuous improvement, there's no end to it, and we have made massive strides in the last 2 years. Like if you told me, like Paul Nolan was telling me to start doing tours, I thought he was mad. And
soon enough I had my own mother, my father-in-law, anyone I could gather up to come on a tour just to get the thing going. And now, in the last few months, we've had people fly over from Texas. We had Canadian company with people coming from the UK. It's incredible.
Brilliant. Little County Arms would be delighted as well. Barry Kennedy would be a happy man. But it goes to show the right initiative, and it brings even extra business, not into your own business, but also into the town as well. AppliedPI.com is the website. There's a dedicated section for those lean tours. Check it out though. Check out the tours. Check out what the work that Kevin and Mark and the team in Applied PI do. If you haven't heard of them before, well, you should have. And if you look them up, you certainly won't forget them as well. Kevin, it's been a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you for sharing your lean journey. And I'm really looking forward to learning where it goes next.
Yeah, thank you, Ron.
So there you go. Thanks for meeting Kevin. AppliedPI.com. That's it for this evening. Thanks to Neil McDonnell there from ISME as well, and talking about their key asks of the government for Budget 2027, particularly focused around indigenous businesses and how the government can help businesses scale. When you hear the story Kevin has just told there, you can see why we need to put resources into local companies, what they can achieve and the growth that they can deliver as well. That's it. Joe Cooney's here next with Country Roads. I'll talk to you all next week.